Today, we're diving into a true crime story that's almost too hard to believe. It's a story of love, obsession, and a brutal murder that went unsolved for more than 20 years. And the killer? Well, she was hiding in the last place anyone would ever think to look, inside the Los Angeles Police Department itself. That right there? That's the voice of the killer, Stephanie Lazarus. But it took 37 years for anyone to hear that confession. To understand how we get to that point, our story doesn't start with the murder. No. It starts with the shocking moment the truth finally, and I mean finally, saw the light of day. So let's go back to 2009, a moment that completely upended a case that had been cold for 23 years. Okay, so you have to picture this. Stephanie Lazarus wasn't just some beat cop. She was a respected, decorated detective. She was known for being this tenacious investigator who solved high-profile art thefts. So when her own colleagues asked her to come down to the station to consult on a case, she walked right in, no hesitation. Minutes later, she was in handcuffs, accused of a murder from 1986. The question is, how on earth did a killer manage to hide in plain sight for that long? Well, the answer lies in one single tiny piece of evidence. Something that was carefully preserved for decades, just waiting for science to finally catch up. It all came down to a bite mark. For 23 long years, the murder of a brilliant young woman, a nursing director named Sherry Rasmussen, was officially unsolved. The LAPD's official story? It was a random burglary that went terribly wrong. Case closed. It was just filed away, collecting dust in a cold case locker. But then, in 2008, a couple of cold case detectives decided, you know what, let's give it a fresh look. And buried deep inside an old evidence freezer, they found the one thing that was about to blow this whole case wide open. So, this is absolutely crucial. Back in 1986, during the original autopsy, a really sharp-eyed criminalist noticed a bite mark on Sherry Rasmussen's arm. And he did something brilliant. He carefully took a swab of it, collecting the attacker's saliva. Now, back then, DNA tech was basically science fiction, but that simple act of just preserving that little sample, it turned out to be the single most important decision in this entire investigation. Now, you'd think that would be it, right? But the path to justice here was anything but straight. The first huge break actually came 5 years before the arrest. In 2004, a criminalist finally tested that old swab, and the result was a bombshell. The DNA belonged to a woman. This just completely shattered the official theory about male burglars. So she digs into the old case file and finds a note about a third-party female who'd been harassing the victim. But, and get this, when she brought it up with her supervisor, he told her something shocking. He said the suspect was an LAPD detective and that she was not a part of this. Just like that, the lead was dropped, and the case went cold for 5 more years. That DNA result, a female killer, it changed everything. It meant the motive wasn't some random burglary. So to understand the real reason Sherry Rasmussen was killed, we've got to rewind all the way back to the months leading up to that horrible day in February 1986. At the very heart of this story is a classic but incredibly tragic love triangle. You have Sherry Rasmussen, this successful, well-loved nursing director. She's just 3 months into her marriage with a guy named John Ruin. But John had a serious ex-girlfriend from college, a woman who had since become a young, ambitious LAPD officer, Stephanie Lazarus. Right after John and Sherry got engaged, you could just feel the heartbreak in Lazarus's diary entries. But that sorrow, it didn't last. It quickly twisted into a dangerous obsession. She actually went to Sherry's hospital and confronted her with a chilling threat. Then, after the wedding, the newlyweds started getting these constant hang-up calls. And just a month before the murder, Lazarus showed up at their home, uninvited. Once, she was even in her full police uniform, carrying her service weapon. And then, on that tragic day, John Rutin came home from work and walked into an absolute nightmare. His wife, Sherry, was dead on their living room floor. She had been brutally beaten and then shot 3 times. The crime scene itself told a story, but the original detectives, they just completely misread the clues. It was clear Sherry had fought for her life. The killer even used a blanket to try and muffle the gunshots. The whole place was staged to look like a burglary gone wrong, with stereo equipment stacked near the door. But the real giveaway, the thing that screamed this was personal, it was what was missing. It wasn't jewelry, it wasn't cash. The only thing taken from that home was John and Sherry's marriage license. This is where the story gets really, really disturbing. Because the killer, she was named on day one. But instead of the police following the most obvious lead, the entire investigation was steered in a totally different direction, and it raises some serious questions about the LAPD itself. You see, Shuri had told her father all about this obsessive ex-girlfriend who was an LAPD cop. So, the second he found out his daughter had been murdered, Nels Rasmussen told the lead detectives exactly who they needed to investigate. And what did they do? They repeatedly dismissed him. One detective even told him he'd been watching too much television. Can you even imagine? I mean, just look at the difference here. On one side, you have the official LAPD theory, a botched burglary by two guys they couldn't identify. A complete guess. On the other side, you have what Sherry's own father was telling them. This was a deliberate murder carried out by a very specific person with a very clear motive. LAPD officer Stephanie Lazarus. One was a shot in the dark, the other was the tragic truth. So you have to ask yourself, why would they ignore him? Well, if you look at the official case file, what they called the murder book, you start to get some deeply unsettling clues. Because key documents were just gone. The original detectives' handwritten notes vanished. Records of interviews where the family specifically named Stephanie Lazarus missing. It was like any trail that led to Officer Lazarus had been scrubbed clean from the official record. And if that wasn't chilling enough for you, get this. For 2 different stretches of time during the 1990s, Stephanie Lazarus, the killer herself, was assigned to work in the exact same LAPD division where the murder book for her own crime was being stored. She had potential access to the evidence against her for years. All right, so let's fast forward. After all that time, how did this 23-year secret finally get unraveled? How did Sherry's family finally get their day in court? Once that new team of cold case detectives zeroed in on Lazarus in 2009, they had to move very carefully. They secretly tailed her, and when she threw away a drink cup, they snagged it to get a fresh DNA sample. The lab confirmed it, a perfect match to the saliva from the bite mark on Sherry's arm. In 2012, after a trial that dragged all these dark secrets into the light, a jury found her guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to 27 years to life. For decades, even after she was convicted, Lazarus insisted she was innocent. But then, in 2023, when she was up for parole for the first time, she finally confessed. She admitted that she went to the condo that day to confront Sherry. She claimed the whole thing escalated into what she called a hellacious bar fight, which ended with her shooting and killing Sherry Rasmussen. Now, that confession almost got her out. An initial 2-person panel actually recommended her for parole. But after Sherry's family and the original prosecutors gave emotional testimony, the full parole board stepped in, reviewed the decision, and in late 2024, they reversed it. Stephanie Lazarus is still in prison. At the end of the day, this case is a horrifying story about a crime of passion, for sure. But it leaves us with a much bigger, much more disturbing question. It shows us how a grieving father's pleas were ignored because he was pointing the finger at one of their own. How critical evidence just disappeared from a murder book. It forces us all to ask a really tough question. When the very system that's designed to protect you is the one that fails, who polices the police?